Good morning. I'm Caitlin with Wiregrass Daily News, and I'm here with Mr. Dave Stock, who is running for City Commission District 4. Good
Good
morning.
morning. Thank you.
Thank you for coming in this morning. So, I do have a few questions. First question is, what do you see as the primary responsibilities of a commissioner?
Well, the city commissioners, I would say their first and major responsibility is just to be a representative for the people. That's the most basic. So our job is to represent our citizens, our constituents, try to determine what their wants, needs are, and then be their voice. So I think first and foremost, to be a good representative and to be a good voice for our citizens. I think the other major things that we do, we approve budgets. We work through problems that we have. And so I think the commissioners overall, they should really be available to not only answer the call when the city has an issue that we have to address, but also when the constituents have an issue. We need to be able to pick up the phone and talk to them and say, hey, I'll help you with this problem. And so not just being the voice, not just voting, but helping solve problems. I think those are just the fundamentals of what every commissioner should be doing.
How do you plan to balance your role as a commissioner with other elected officials and departments?
I think the first thing is really when we work with other commissioners or department heads or whatnot, it's just to come at things with trust and honesty. I trust that they're going to be honest with me. I want them to trust that I will be honest with them. I think we also just mutual respect. We might have different opinions. We might have different thought processes. We probably came up through different ways, or we were educated or trained in different ways. So understanding that there's usually a couple different ways to think about things. So dealing with those things with respect and mutual concern. But at the end of the day, I do work for my constituents, and I think the constituents want someone who's going to be out there and vigorously defend them or advocate on their behalf. And so, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to come at that with respect and with a friendly nature. And I think there's some areas where we might not have agreement on, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty where we'll be able to agree and to work through issues and find ways that we all win. At the end of the day, that's what we want. We all want to win. We all want to move forward. And I think I'll be able to do that very well with them.
What experiences or skills will you bring to the table that will make you an effective commissioner?
Well, I've got almost 30 years of experience between my military career and my business career. So when I was in the military, the last 8 years, when I was on active duty, I was actually working at some of the highest levels of Army aviation. I was in and out of the Pentagon. I was briefing four-star general officers on major issues that affected Army aviation, not just here in Alabama, but around the world. So I've got experience dealing with hard problems, trying to solve, these issues, and in some ways being very creative on how we would do that. But I've got large program experience. I also manage one of the largest refuel contracts in the Department of Defense right here at Fort Rucker, Alabama. And it's one of the best contracts out there. So I've got experience working with a team, building a team. We've got great employees that we work with. And then on top of that, I've also had a few business endeavors here that have been very successful that I started. So we started a flight school a number of years ago, trained high school kids and a lot of other folks here in town on how to fly airplanes. And then we transitioned from that into real estate development and working downtown to, take down some buildings that were just too bad to save. At the same point in time, we also found some buildings that we could revitalize. And so we've got experience on the global stage, Alabama, Dothan, leadership, doesn't just come from a short period of time. It comes from, a lifetime. And I think I have a lifetime of experience in leadership that I can help with our city.
What strategies will you use to ensure transparent and open communication with constituents?
I think transparency is really the bedrock of everything of an elected official. If we can't really be transparent, how do we have the trust of the people who elect us? So first and foremost, I believe that. As my strategy is to do that, I would say, number one, we need to be in communication with them all the time. Our constituents need to know what we're doing for them. We are their representative. I started a website when I ran for office. That website is going to be active. It's called www.davefordothan.com. And I was the first person to do that. And the reason why is I want people to know, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm doing. This is what I believe in. And so, the city has some mechanisms for putting out information. Of course, we would use those. I would use my personal website, our Facebook page, my cell phone. Whatever we need to do to communicate and be transparent, that's what we want to do, because I want our citizens to know and to trust that their representative is there working for them.
How do you plan to support local economic development and attract new businesses to your region?
I've been involved in local economic development for a long time here in Dothan through our other businesses and whatnot. I've been involved with the city and with the city leadership for a long time as we've worked on those projects. I think the number one thing that we can do as a city to encourage economic development is to lay the foundation, is to create the environment that businesses want to come here. Government has historically been bad about trying to operate business or force business. We need to create the environment where businesses want to come, where they'll succeed, where they'll do well. I think we can do that by making sure that we have, you know, low regulation. You know, we can't make it so hard to build or to design things. We have to make sure that, hey, we want nice things. We have standards, but we don't want to over-regulate. I think there's also some ways we can incentivize businesses here to come to Dothan that are maybe thinking about it. And, you know, not giving away the store, but there's some ways that we can say, hey, we're going to make this very attractive for you to come in financially. And, you know, if we're not getting the business now, as long as we're not giving away the store and not costing the taxpayers a ton of money, incentivizing them and doing things that's going to get business to come in is going to be a benefit for us in the long term as well as for our citizens in the near term.
What steps will you take to ensure that taxpayer dollars are spent efficiently and responsibly?
I think most Americans, they're kind of jaded when it comes to tax spending. When you kind of see the government, it's so large. A lot of Americans, I think a lot of folks here in Dothan, they think, why can't we run a city, a government, like we do our household? You know, we all make choices. We all make choices every day about, hey, this is what my budget is. This is what I can spend money on. And so I think just as a commissioner, it's our job to be responsible and to kind of look at those things, say, hey, this is not my money. This is our taxpayer dollars. How can we spend this money wisely? How can we look and say, okay, this is a priority for our citizens. This is something that, you know, public safety, infrastructure, those are things that the government should be in the business of doing, providing that safe environment for all of us. So prioritizing those things and then making some tough decisions. You know, you don't have an unlimited budget. I don't believe in raising taxes because once you kind of start down that path, when does it end? You know, you can always tax, but if you're going to just keep spending, at some point in time, you'll run out of money. So just being wise about how we do that. And then I think it's really important that on some of our big issues that we have come down the road, we ask our citizens, what do you want? At the end of the day, you know, we're here to work for them. And if we know there's something they don't want and we do it, shame on us. You know, so I think we should reach out and we should have that dialogue. And if there's some really big issues coming down, let's put it on the ballot. Let's make sure that they have an opportunity to weigh in on that. And if they support it, I'm 100% behind it, no doubt.
What are your priorities for improving infrastructure within your district?
So District 4, you know, I've been around to a lot of our constituents, talking to folks, and, you know, we have some challenges with our roads. We have a lot of folks who they're unhappy with, you know, their neighborhood streets. We have grass growing up through some of them. And so I think there's some areas where we can do a little bit better with our roads. Besides just the general construction that's happening everywhere all over Dothan, you know, we know that there's some big things happening there. And I think there's some things we can do better about that as well. You know, one thing that's really bothered me from the get-go is our lack of signage when it comes to construction. And we have to be better about telling folks how these things are going to go. You know, when you're driving around the circle and you can't figure out what north is from south or east to west because of the way the highways or the designations or what is a frontage road, you know, some people have had a hard time with that. So I think we can have some smart solutions for our infrastructure, like better signage, better communication. We've had a lot of businesses go under because of road construction and infrastructure improvements. So we have to be very mindful of that. I also think when we look at, you know, our electrical grid, our water, our sewer, those infrastructure things are really important to future developments. So we have to make sure that we're investing in our future. We can't only work or worry or focus on what we have today. We have to think about what we're doing in the future and kind of put those investments in place so that we can continue to grow in a reasonable way, in a cost-effective way. We do a little bit over time. It's a lot more affordable than trying to come up with a ton of money all at once. And usually it's too late, you know, if you're waiting till the very end to do that. So we got to lay the groundwork today for the infrastructure to be more successful for tomorrow.
How do you plan to ensure that public services like police and fire, healthcare are accessible, efficient, and adequately funded?
First and foremost, I believe we have some of the best fire, police, and healthcare in the country. I've lived all over the country. I've lived all over the world, and we're not perfect. As long as humans are involved, we'll never be perfect. But we have great, great healthcare. We have two of the best hospitals, two of the best, healthcare, I'd say, facilities in the area. So we are very blessed, and I want to make sure that we're supporting them and giving them the tools. I've been a military person, a business person. I've never run a hospital. I'm not going to try to tell hospitals how to do their job, but they do a great job. I want to support them. The police, same thing. There's a lot of nuance. It's my job as a commissioner to find out what they need, hold them accountable. It's taxpayer dollars. We got to make sure we're asking hard questions. Hard questions doesn't mean, something negative. It just means, hey, we want to make sure that we're informed and that we're transparent. And I think also, when it comes to funding, it's like if they need something, and we need to prioritize that, as I mentioned before, with our budget, with our process. Because if you don't have good health care, if you don't have, strong fire and police, then you don't really have a strong community. I think that's the bedrock of our community. I think that's why so many people love Dothan in our areas, because we have such great support systems. So I'm 100% backer of all of those. I've donated to a lot of those foundations, and again, we're not perfect, but we have a good communication with them. We have a good rapport, and we'll continue to have good dialogue to make sure that we keep moving forward.
What is your plan to improve public safety in the district while ensuring equal treatment of all residents?
Well, I'm a big believer in, when you look at public safety, again, not everyone's perfect. There's been folks who have, made some mistakes or whatnot. But what I love about, our police department is that I've spoken with them many times. We have a great chief of police. Again, no one's perfect. We have officers who maybe their emotions, get out of control at one point in time or whatnot. I mean, these things happen all across the country. So I can't suspect that Dothan will ever be immune to those things. But the transparency aspect of it, we have such a professional police force and a law enforcement training academy. Making sure that we're transparent with our law enforcement, I think, is important to building trust with the community. I also believe, and I don't think anyone would disagree with this, but people need to be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And so when you think about that, it's like, it shouldn't matter what you look like, where you come from. If you're doing something wrong, you're doing something wrong. And if you're doing something right, then we need to support you because you're doing something right. So I think if we keep those fundamentals and transparency, support the police, support our communities, making sure that we're having fair and open investigations, I think will go a long way in building trust on both sides of the fence.
How do you plan to collaborate with local law enforcement and community organizations to address crime and community safety?
Well, I think overall, we do have some challenges, and I was one of the first candidates to really kind of call out some of the challenges that we're having. You have shootings at movie theaters that we've never had problems with that before. We've got crime, we've got homelessness. We have things that are spreading, beyond the normal areas where one might suspect that they would be. And so I think we have to ask ourselves why. I think we have to get down to the crux of it. Part of that is poverty. If you look at areas where you have crime, higher crime, things like that, they tend to come from areas with with higher poverty rates. So I think as a city and as a commissioner, we need to look at those areas and say, what can we do? Try to make their lives better, try to give them more opportunities. Because I think at the end of the day, if people really work hard to better themselves and they have opportunity, if they have hope, then they're not going to be, mixed up with crime and things like that. So I think there's multiple ways we can do that, whether it's through local organizations, support organizations. But we do have to be tough on crime. I think that's what our citizens expect. And we can't just be okay with another shooting. We can't just be okay with some of the other violent crime. We have to have really no tolerance when it comes to that. And our judges, our DAs, our police, everybody is involved in that. And I think that's one thing I love about this community is that, we don't give up. We have a strong support system when it comes to police. I think we need to continue to look at the root cause, though, of those social issues. How can we support organizations that get after that? I think that's what will help also lower crime, in addition to the technology that's coming out, investing in some of that technology in areas where we know crime is higher. We'd be silly not to use it. And so I would definitely be supportive of that as well.
How will you address environmental sustainability within your role as a commissioner?
Well, I'm a big believer in, being conservative when it comes to our environment. I don't want to destroy our environment. I want our children to have, a safe, healthy place to grow up in as well. So I think when it comes to the environment, it's just making sure we're making smart decisions, with our infrastructure, with our growth. We have some of the best parks and wildlife areas and trails and all that in Dothan. So I'm really happy with the steps that we've made as a city to preserve some of that. But I just think we need to be smart as we grow and develop, make sure that we're not getting too much pollution, and that we're making sure that if we have an opportunity to use sustainable building supplies or materials, that we do that. But you know, I do think Dothan is one of the best parts of the country when it comes to how we manage our environment. We have so many farmers, so many hunters. The environment, that is what we are. We live with it. We work in it, and so I would say we got it under control, and we're going to keep doing it pretty well.
What steps will you take to address climate change, manage waste, and protect natural resources within your district?
There's a lot of debate on climate change and what's real and what's not real when it comes to that. I think what we really have to focus on is what can we do, and I think if we can do now, it's a commonplace. Like we recycle, these things like when I was growing up, like there was no recycling. So all the little things that we can do to try to be better and more efficient with our resources. But I don't subscribe to the fact that we're just destroying our planet and climate change is getting out of hand. I think if you look at the history of the world and you look at all the changes we've been through from ice ages and everything else, there's mixed science on that. So I really think what we should focus on are the things that we can do and we can do well. And I just think being smart about how we conserve our water and how we conserve our energy and how we recycle. I think that's stuff that everyday people can do and get behind. And a lot of people are going to electric cars and electric vehicles, and we have nuclear power down here in the South that's so efficient and affordable, and a lot of other areas of the country don't have that, and look at how worse off they are. So I think finding responsible ways like nuclear power and other things that we can use that's clean energy, it's not polluting the environment. I think things like that we should get behind and support. But again, this is why I love Dothan. We're doing it right down here. And I don't really see any major issues with what we're doing and how it would affect our environment or the climate.
What are your plans for supporting education in your district, especially for underfunded schools or communities?
So education, I think, really kind of gets back to the concerns of the broken family or the poverty. We are spending a lot more on education today than we really have in the history of our country. And I don't think throwing more money at it is necessarily going to fix the problem. I do think there's some areas where we can increase our funding. We're not funding in Dothan as high as other parts of the state for sure. But I really think we need to get at the crux of what the issue is. And if we can get in there and support these kids and support these families and give them the tools and the resource that they need to be successful, I think that's how we're going to improve our schools. And I think we really have to support organizations like Time Youth Dothan and the Boys and Girls Club and these other organizations that are really getting after the kids and trying to help them like change their life and say, hey, I can do something different. I can break this cycle. I can get out there and I can have a future and a career. One thing that I think education does, education or training, provides opportunity. I grew up really poor. We had 5 kids in our family just outside of St. Louis, and I was on free lunches at school. I went through that. We were on welfare. I wanted new shoes. I cut grass when I was 14 so I could buy a new pair of tennis shoes. We have people who are living that today. It's hard to go to school and focus if you're hungry. It's hard to go to school and focus, when you've got one parent or a broken home. And so I think we need to find a way to really use these organizations that we have in town to get out there and to engage on a higher level, because that's what changed my life. People invested in me. I had mentors. They gave me a hope. They gave me opportunity. And then I worked hard. And I think if we convey that to our youth, we'll start to see the schools change. I do think we have people that really care in our schools, our administrators, our teachers. I don't think we have a broken school system. I just think we have problems and challenges. And honestly, if we don't fix those, how can we expect Dothan to really grow and do better? No really successful city has a failing school system. So we have to get serious. It's not our job as commissioners to fix the school system, but it is our job to work with the school board and support them. And I would say in some ways challenge them like, hey, let's find a plan. Let's find a way that we can make this better. And then let's use the other community resources that we can to help engage those students because we want them to be successful. It's to all of our benefit. Have a strong school system, have kids that thrive, kids that do well. And so I think that should be a very high priority for everyone in Dothan to engage with our schools.
How will you work to ensure that there are adequate resources and programs for the youth in the community?
Well, I do think our leisure services, we have a lot of awesome things going for us in Dothan when it comes to that. The Boys and Girls Club is a great example of a private organization, a charity organization that is doing great things. Again, Time Youth Dothan. There are some city-funded programs, and I think we need to look at, as times change, as communities change, like, do we have the right resources in the right locations? And some of those may be within my district, some of those may not be, but those are areas we need to look at across the city to support our youth. One thing that I've agreed to do, I volunteered this. It was just I kind of felt led to do this. Is I'm donating my commissioner salary if I'm elected to 3 local youth organizations: Time Youth Dothan, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Child Advocacy. I'm doing that because they're really doing great things, and they need the funding to keep doing those great things. So the Lord's blessed me in a lot of ways. I don't really need the commissioner salary, and so I'd rather take that money and give that to organizations that are doing awesome things. And so that's one thing I committed to do. But I do think we can look at, the United Way is a great partner. They support so many organizations, and we're huge supporters of the United Way as well. But I do think the city, can look at, well, how do we give grants and who do we give grants to? And we need to find the folks that are really doing great things that support our strategic goals and our plans. And if we have some of those partners that are supporting kids, whether the youth programs, education, then I think we need to look really hard at that because that's how we got to give them things to do. We have to support them. We have to develop them. And I don't think we can just do nothing. That's for sure.
How will you ensure that healthcare and social services are accessible to all residents?
Healthcare is one of those things over the past 10 or 12 years have been a hot button topic in our country. I do think we need to have adequate healthcare access, for everybody. I don't think parents should have sick children and not be able to get them the care that they need. So I'm a big supporter of working with our healthcare providers. That is their industry. I know that there's a lot of free care that's provided. I've talked to some of our local hospital CEOs, and when you look at the magnitude of what they provide to our community, most of these are some of these are for-profit businesses, but they do a lot for our community. So I think making sure that we have the infrastructure, that we support our healthcare industry, and then there are some ways that the government has, and whether it's Houston County Health Department or other areas that they service our residents, but I think we can't forget about those who struggle. And that's I think the thing growing up with the way I did. I'm never going to forget the challenges that a lot of our citizens face every day. And so I think having that mindset, however we deal with these issues, however we are confronted by these problems, but having that mindset and saying, hey, we're not going to forget about them, whether it's healthcare or other things, we're going to try to find a way to support them and make sure they have access. And we have such a generous healthcare community here. I just can't state that enough, who are willing to help. And so I think we just continue to support them is what we can do to really make it better.
What initiatives will you support to address mental health and addiction issues within your district?
I think we have a real challenge with mental health, not only in Dothan, but across the country. And I know Spectra Care just opened a mental health facility here in Dothan. I think we need to really look at, and better understand the numbers, and how we're dealing with those. There's some limits on what government can do in these situations as well, but I think we need to support the industries. I do think we have a huge need here. I think if you go downtown, you'll see a lot of folks who are struggling with homelessness. It's not just because they've fallen on hard times. Some of them are dealing with some serious mental health issues that we need to be able to provide the resources to deal with that. So I don't think we can be oblivious to the fact that it exists. It's a challenge. Again, I don't know that government can do everything in this situation, but I think we can support the infrastructure. We can support the development of the facilities. We can help incentivize those facilities, and we can talk about the need and help articulate the need. I think if there is a well articulated need, and we can have those tough discussions about these issues, and then I think we'll see more support coming for those. But there's issues like homelessness and mental health. A lot of people don't want to talk about, and they're tough discussions. But you're a downtown business like we are, and we have a lot of other businesses, around us. You see this on the regular, and doing nothing is not an option. So we have to work hard. We have to reach out to those individuals in that community, the mental health care community, and say, hey, what do we need to do? How do we need to address this? And I think we need to be open to their feedback and their suggestions, and run with the professionals here, because I think we do need to do something about it. We can't continue to let the problem get worse.
How do you plan to address homelessness in the district, and what role will local government play in providing a solution?
Well, again, homelessness, it's sad, and I think we have such a giving community, such a benevolent community, and in some ways, I think we may be making it worse. And I know that's not going to be a popular thing to say, but when you look at, the homeless stats, are they getting worse from people who live in the Dothan area, or is it getting worse from people coming to Dothan? And at a lot of businesses downtown where they've had challenges with homeless, our business included, when the police arrive, or when there's crime or other things, we're seeing that a lot of our homeless, population, they're from out of state. They're coming to Dothan, and there is a limit to what we can support in Dothan, I believe. And I think we have to try to balance how we deal with that. And if we're making it so comfortable for folks to come to Dothan because we have so many resources to support them, we can't be surprised that the numbers keep growing. We can't be surprised that the crime gets worse with that. So again, this is an area where we have to have some hard discussions. And I know we're not going to have agreement on everything, but I think we would all pretty much agree that it's not getting better. And so if it's not getting better, we better be prepared to change and do something different, or how can we expect different results? So I think what the government needs to do is to continue to be compassionate, just like our community. But I think we need to say, we can't just give people stuff every day and expect them to get out of it. What are we doing to help build a plan, help them get out of it? So rather than a handout, a hand up. I think one of our politicians recently said, we have these support systems to be safety nets, not hammocks. So at some point, I think we really need to say, are we helping people get out of this situation in their life? And if we're not, can't help everybody. We need to help the ones that want to do better. And I think that's where some of our tough choices come in. You can't expect people to invest millions of dollars in their community, in their downtown, and in businesses, to have homeless people camped out on the sidewalk right in front of them. That makes people not want to come into your business. And so again, I know these are hard discussions to have. I'm sure some folks will agree with me that we have to do something different. So I'm going to be willing to stand up and have those hard conversations, and leverage the resources that we have with the city, while keeping in mind our business owners, who are dealing with this stuff on the regular. And I think there's a smart way we can get through it. I think we can make it better. And everything I'm saying here is not to bash these organizations that support the homeless. I mean, they're doing the Lord's work for sure. But I do think we have to, take a step back and say, how can we make it better? How can we, fix the homeless problem that we have without encouraging people from Florida, Georgia, and Mississippi to come to Dothan and overwhelm our support services?
What measures will you take to ensure equal access to government services for all community members?
Well, I think first and foremost, there should be no discrimination amongst our government services for anybody. I'm a big believer that the government is there to work for our citizens, not the citizens to work for our government. So when it comes to the staff, the services that we have, I think we have a great city staff. I think we have great leadership. I've not seen personally any instances of folks being discriminated against, but if I ever were to, we would deal with that pretty seriously. People need to understand, like, this is our community. The representatives support everybody, and there's no room for discrimination in our society today. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to judge people on their character, not their background, not where they grew up, not what they look like. And so we want to make sure everyone has access. Again, if you're gonna use our services, of course, I think everyone expects you to be respectful and to get along and stuff like that, And if you want to show up and use those things, then we're all for it. We're all supportive, But we have a lot of people that come from different backgrounds, and we have to get along. We have to work together. Shared services, they're not unending. So we only have so many resources. So I think we have, and I really don't think this is a problem within our city. If it is, again, I'm going to look at it closely, but I think we just have a very welcoming community, folks that want to get along, and our services are available for everyone. And if for a minute I hear otherwise, I will be the pit bull that goes and attacks that issue, no doubt.
How do you plan to ensure transparency in your decision-making and in the allocation of resources?
Well, again, transparency is the bedrock of any type of elected government. We have to be transparent to our constituents. When it comes to resources, we're going to have to prioritize. They're not unending. So I think as long as we're communicating the challenges, the issues, giving our constituents a chance to chime in with their concerns, I think at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our constituents have a voice. But we have almost 9,000 registered voters just in my district alone. We can't have 9,000 decision makers, and everyone is going to disagree about things at some point in time. But we have to have a little bit of faith and trust when we elect someone, that we're electing the right person. I think that's why it's so important to do your diligence and make sure that you're hiring the most qualified person to do this, and then put a little bit of trust in them. And then, what I would return the favor would be to say, hey, I'm going to communicate with you. I'm going to be transparent with you. I'm going to tell you what's going on. I'm never going to lie to you. And we may disagree. Most spouses disagree quite frequently, so you can, I think, expect constituents to disagree. But at the end of the day, if we have those honest discussions, if we have true transparency and communication, then I think we can work through those issues and make sure that we're doing the best thing for our city.
What steps will you take to ensure that you are held accountable to your constituents?
Well, one thing I've always thought was accountability happens every election cycle. And if you're happy with the way things are moving, then reelect that person. And if you're unhappy, well, then look at an alternative. And so I think accountability is challenging and asking questions. I think you should be able to, any plan, any decision should be able to stand up to scrutiny. And if it can't, we need to ask ourselves, well, why did we do this? If you can't take a little bit of heat and talk through an issue and look at it from all sides, then, maybe we shouldn't do it. So I do think, that transparency, that accountability, it could just be having a town hall meeting and letting people show up and ask you some hard questions. I don't think we as public officials should be afraid of hard questions. I think we should welcome those. And at the end, if we look at these issues, if we look at these problems, and at the end of the road, when we're trying to make a decision, if it can't stand up to scrutiny, probably shouldn't.
How will you handle conflicts of interest and ensure ethical conduct in your position?
Well, that's one thing. When I first announced I was going to run for this position, I had someone post on our Facebook page like, oh, well, you've got investments in downtown. You're just trying to take care of yourself. And I was somewhat shocked by that because I've never really thought I've always tried to be honest and transparent. But I can see how people would think that. I think when you look at government officials, and especially at the national level, it's like, how did someone become a multimillionaire while only being in public office their whole life on a very low salary? It makes you wonder. So I do think we have to go above and beyond as public servants to make sure that people will trust us. So for me specifically, one thing I committed from the very beginning when that first person asked that question, said, hey, if there's anything at all that has to do with any of my business or my development, I'm going to recuse myself right away. I'm not going to vote on anything that has to do with me. The rest of the commissioners can handle that, and they can do the right thing. And I would expect them to do the same thing. I think we have honest mayor and commissioners. And I think anytime if there's going to be something that, these commission jobs and mayoral jobs, these are part-time. These aren't full-time positions. So you're going to have other business. You're going to have other jobs. But I think you need to be able to trust our public servants that if there is something where there could be a conflict, they're going to back out. And I promise that I'm going to do that.
Why are you running for commissioner, and what motivates you to serve in this capacity?
Well, I'm running because I don't think anybody can do it better than me. And I know that kind of sounds a little bit arrogant, but I've worked hard my whole life. I've been through the struggles. I've been successful. And I've been involved in selfless service, whether it's the military or church or other organizations, for pretty much my whole life. And so I think I'm the best qualified person for the job, to be quite honest. I think when you look at the way that my career has prepared me for tough decision making, for complex problems, nothing prepares you like that experience, to face future issues. So I don't know what's going to come down the road for the city. No one's got a crystal ball, but I do know with the experience that I have, with my education, with my training, that we'll be able to confront those challenges head on. I'm going to do it with integrity. I'm going to do it with courage. Sometimes it's hard to do the right thing. And so I'm going to be willing to stand up. And a person close to me, one of our pastors said once before, he said, it's never the wrong time to do the right thing. And we have to be willing to do that. We do. And so one thing the military did teach me was when it comes to something that you're unhappy with, okay, don't just gripe and complain, provide a solution, and I feel like I'm the solution. I'm not going to complain if I'm not happy with another candidate. I'm not going to complain if our city is not going the direction that I want it to go in, or if the challenges aren't being handled in a smart way. I'm not just going to complain. I'm going to do something about it. My candidacy is doing something.
Well, thank you so much for coming in today, Dave, and good luck with your election.
Thank you so much.